national awareness of institutional racism lead to more research funding for HBCUs? All across the nation, there is social and racial unrest. The murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor has awakening the conscience of the United States, and many companies, agencies, and nonprofit organizations are responding. Just recently, the National Science Board issued a statement on racism following the murders of George Floyd, and the statement affirmed the board's commitment to understanding and elevating racial justice through the sciences. They specifically called out HBCUs. This is a quote from their statement. They said, "We recognize the unique legacy and important role of historically black colleges and universities that contribute to the science and engineering research enterprise and creating and educating future STEM leaders. And we commit to increasing support for research at HBCUs, including through existing programs where NSF has been influential agents for positive change." Today, we want to talk about how HBCUs can capitalize off of the moment and really find ways to bring revenue to their campuses for the very important research that HBCUs are conducting. We know that the nation is missing out by not funding HBCUs appropriately. And we know that there are institutions out there all over the nation, HBCUs, that have the type of research that can elevate our sciences and to help the United States to advance beyond where we are today. But because of these funding inequities, because of institutional racism that is preventing the flow of revenue to HBCUs often aren't getting the opportunity to do that. This is HBCU Mixtape, which is funded by the National Science Foundation, where we interview senior researchers at HBCUs so that we understand the latest scientific and technological innovation that stem from HBCU research. Today we have someone who has had an outstanding career, but he's actually new to the HBCU community. We're going to be talking to Dr. Bruce Jones. Dr. Bruce Jones is the Vice President for Research at Howard University. But prior to coming to Howard University, Dr. Jones had over 30 years of academic and administrative experiences in higher education. Throughout the course of his career, he's had 2 endowed chair professorships. This is the highest level. And he has had remarkable success all over the nation. When he was in Missouri, he launched Missouri's first nationwide comprehensive assessment for student achievement. When he was in South Florida, at the University of South Florida, he served as the director of the David C. Anchin Endowed Professorship and director of the Anchin Center. Under his leadership, the center grew from a budget of about $625,000 to a record high of more than $30 million by the time he left. So Dr. Jones is the perfect person for us to talk to about this very important topic, about what's going on in the United States today and how that can influence how HBCUs are viewed and how HBCUs can strategically position ourselves as a resource to help the United States deal with these very pressing issues. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Jones.
Thank you and the QAM network for inviting me to speak on these critical areas that have been long-standing critical areas for years and decades. And so we can't talk about these issues enough, particularly as that talk leads to policy solutions and a broader dialogue on how to remedy the issues with varied peoples. Went to school out on Long Island at a little university, liberal university, Adelphi University. And from there, I went to graduate studies for my master's and PhD at Columbia University in New York City. And went on from there to Pittsburgh as an assistant professor on the tenure track, the University of Pittsburgh. I see Howard very differently from other places in that it's not a technical professional experience in and of itself. It is emotional, interpersonal, deep experience that you have as a function of the people who are so passionate about it. What in particular makes it unique is that it is an institution that recognizes the critical importance of the past in the way that other institutions I have experienced do not. There tends to be, I believe, in American culture to really look at phenomena and examine phenomena from a research standpoint in the present. But at Howard University, there is this historical context that's brought to bear on research in terms of how people view and look at problems that makes it unique. Another unique feature that ties to the history of Howard is what it houses. For example, the Moreland Spring Yarn Research Center is one of the world's largest repository of documents associating with the African-American experience. So we have that at our fingertips in a way that would not be available anywhere else in terms of the research that we do. Howard is unique from a research standpoint in its recognition of the impact or the potential impact of research on the quality of life of people. Howard, for example, is the only HBCU in the history of the United States to attain Research 1 status.
Prior to me inviting you to this interview, had you heard that statement? Had you heard the National Science Board, which oversees the National Science Foundation, put out this declaration that we need to get HBCUs more involved in research, invest more in research?
Howard University has a connection with the National Science Foundation that's unmatched, particularly insofar as HBCUs are concerned, and other federal agencies. Our connection with NSF is the highest connection or relationship that we have compared to any other federal agency.
Okay, well, give us some insight into how NSF plans to operationalize that. How do they plan to make it more than a statement?
We have National Science Foundation on our campus throughout the year, interfacing with faculty, interfacing with students on how to systematically pursue resources that NSF has to support faculty and student research. They also are a proponent of partnerships. And as a result of being a proponent of institutional partnerships, Howard engages in a number of partnerships with their support with other institutions of higher education, particularly our HBCU partners. Much of that work is supported by the National Science Foundation. And lastly, I would say NSF is very interested in interdisciplinary research, of which we have cited that over and over again as our mantra as a research institution. That is, we want to promote interdisciplinary research. We want to create the venues for that to occur. That is bringing multiple colleges, multiple schools, engineering, business, medicine, nursing, together to examine the problems we face in society, because we know many of the problems we face in society are multidimensional in nature. So the traditional way, for example, if you're talking about corrections, mass incarceration, we know it's not just about police reform, okay, which would bring in that element of law enforcement. It's also about economics and jobs development. It's also about housing. It's also about sociology. It's also about medicine. We know to solve that problem, we have to move away from this idea that we silo the problem involving few people and broaden that effort to include multiple people as a way, with multiple areas of expertise, as a way to solve those problems.
And I definitely want to give NSF credit. NSF is funding this series. So it's because of NSF we get a chance to host the HBCU Mixtape. And data just came out that showed that HBCUs, or that NSF does better than any other agency in supporting HBCUs. Now, that being said, HBCUs are 3% of all institutions of higher education, and they account for about 0.8% of the total funding that NSF is offering. So even though NSF has done a great job, outstanding job, we're still underrepresented. And I think they've acknowledged that at least tacitly through their comment or through their statement. So I'm wondering, how do we increase that 0.8%? And is it mostly on HBCUs to do more, or is there something that NSF can do differently?
NSF has to continue doing what it has been doing, that is reaching aggressively out to HBCUs on how to interface with that agency in the most effective way to solve problems, not only in the African American community, which would be our primary emphasis, but the issues that we look at have implications far beyond just the African American community. The kind of research we do has implications for all communities in and outside of the United States. So they have to continue and not let up that the aggressive outreach efforts that they're engaged in. HBCUs, we need support in building up our infrastructure to actually take on and take advantage of the funding and grant opportunities that are being offered by NSF. In the 1950s, in fact, there's a book by Stuart Leslie, and what is it called? It's called Higher Education, basically in post-World War II era United States, but Stuart Leslie is the author. And he talks about the huge investments in higher education in the United States in post-World War II to build up research infrastructures at predominantly white institutions, such as at MIT, Stanford, Johns Hopkins. And unfortunately, HBCUs were not beneficiaries of those resources. And in fact, HBCUs, as you know, have been woefully underfunded from their inception when it comes to research and labs and classroom infrastructure. That's part of our history, which is why it gets back to my earlier point of looking at where we are now relative to where we have been in the past. There's a reason why in many instances we have issues with our infrastructure. So we do need the kind of support that will help us build an infrastructure that will give us the capacity to take on larger amounts of resources that are available to institutions of higher education. So I would say that it's both.
And they have the HBCU Up program at NSF, and that's done so much for HBCUs across the nation. One of the things that NSF always says is that HBCUs needs to think broader than HBCU Up, because HBCU Up gets all of these computer science grants and all of these grants from the social sciences and engineering, but there's divisions within NSF that actually has a whole lot more money than HBCU Up that's designed to fund things like engineering or computer science. Yeah.
Well, it's something that you say that because, within the federal agencies, there are the set aside portfolios specifically for HBCUs, and that's a good thing. But we need to also get to the point where we can compete in the other portfolios effectively. And because as you've just pointed out, the significant resources are in those other areas. So we need to evolve to that point and secure support to ensure that that occurs. I would say Howard needs to continue doing what it does best, and that is model by doing. We model best practices in research. We house the largest research portfolio insofar as an HBCU is concerned. And we need to continue being good stewards of those resources. And we need to ensure that we have fidelity to our mission. That is, we keep in sight why we're here. We're here to produce for the production of high quality research that has implications and impact on our communities and that is longstanding and is sustaining. So I would say that's one way that we do that in terms of being a leader among HBCUs and a leader in higher education. But also Howard is very adept at partnerships. We partner with other HBCUs in much of the research that we do. And sometimes, we allow for those institutions to be leaders on these initiatives, and other times Howard will step up and be leaders on these initiatives. So I see collaborating and partnerships as key to modeling how we need to act as a collection of HBCUs. And the last piece I alluded to earlier is around the significance of interdisciplinary research. We can't push that enough. We need to really promote as an institution, and we do. In fact, the building where my office is housed is called the Interdisciplinary Research Building. Okay, so the research going on in that building, faculty who want to house research, their research in that building have to show that they're doing interdisciplinary research. Because the idea of looking at problems in a single narrow way is not always the best way to look at problems. So how do we bring collections of expertise around the table to tackle the issues that we face? So in that respect, from an interdisciplinary research, which by the way, the federal agencies are very, very much subscribing to that model of research as well, interdisciplinary research. In that way, we are modeling for other HBCUs of the way we need to move forward with research overall.
Talk about some of the research that's happening at Howard University that excites you.
We at Howard University emphasize partners to the extent, for example, working with Brookhaven's lab in New York, which is where basically in an area near where I was raised. I was raised close to where Brookhaven lab in New York, Long Island is, in areas of dealing with alternatives to fossil fuels. Dr. Thomas Searles, who is a professor in physics, is working closely with Brookhaven lab as an example of that. He's also working on an exciting project to develop a quantum science center, the first of its kind, that will be completely focused, well, for the most part, on increasing the number of people of color in the sciences. I'm impressed, very impressed with Dr. Bahia Muhammad in sociology and the work that she's doing on mass incarceration and the recent work that she's doing on working with children who have parents who have been incarcerated. Her work in sociology, without question, is unmatched and is groundbreaking. Okay, you particularly now, and this is long before George Floyd, this is something that she has dedicated her life and her research to that is quite incredible. Professor Kimberly Jones, who's also the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Engineering and Architecture, she and Courtney Robertson, they're working with the Savannah National Research Center labs on water filtration systems. Think about Flint, Michigan, okay, and that debacle there. So they're working on research, and as with the others, in areas that clearly need more attention, clearly need more people of color involved in those types of research, which then have implications not just for communities of color, but for the United States and for other areas around the world overall. COVID-19 research includes vaccine-related research by Dr. Q Tang in the College of Medicine and Hamayet Ullah in the College of Medicine. To date, you ought to know Howard holds about 16 funded initiatives on COVID-19, which again speaks to Howard being in the vanguard, not only in areas that others are just now looking into, such as genomics for the most part. You also ought to know Howard was in the business of genomics for years, long before many other institutions of higher education. But around crises that emerge in the moment, such as COVID-19, our faculty at Howard jumped on that immediately to see what they can do, not only in terms of new research on vaccines and the sort, but how can they take the research that they are currently working on? You think of, for example, Professor Sudha Sharma in the College of Medicine. Her area was around breast cancer research, but that research she saw immediately has implications for the COVID-19 mitigation strategies. And she sought to pursue those opportunities right away.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah. I'm hoping to have most of those names on the show at one point. Thank you for that comprehensive list, and we will do our homework and look them up. So as we wind down, tell us about what's next for you, personally, professionally. What should we be on the lookout for the next Bruce Jones action?
Well, Dr. Tolson, I'm going to tell you right now, my number one goal is working with President Frederick,
Mhm.
Provost Wooter, and the faculty at Howard to regain our status as a Research One institution of higher education. And
Mhm.
embarking on that journey means many things. It means many opportunities for our faculty and for our students and the work that we do in the community. But it means a lot for Howard's research stature as an institution of higher education. When we get to that point, I think I'm pretty much okay. We'll have the retirement party at that point. But I'm really, and everything that we're doing right now as it concerns the work with you, the work with our federal agencies, the work with our philanthropic partners out in the community, the work with our federal labs, all of that is leading in that direction, because what it means, having Research One status, means that we will even be able to do more. It sort of takes us
Mhm.
leap bounds ahead in a way that we would eventually get ahead, but we can get there quicker where we want to know, where we want to go with this kind of status. So I see that as my next step. That is my focus now as we work through all the issues that we're dealing with right now. We remain steadfast in that Research One goal.
We ask everyone who comes on HBCU Mixtape, what's your favorite hip hop artist or what's your favorite rap line?
Well, let me turn around here. My favorite artist is Gladys Knight.
All
Okay,
right.
all right, right here. All right, this
Yeah,
takes me
yeah, I
about
can dig it.
aging myself. All right, so I go back to the Motown era. But I will tell you this, as far as Howard is concerned, there's so many famous folks that have come out of Howard in various
Yeah,
industries, including music. So we all know, as you pointed out to me more than once, hip hop's origins go back.
yeah.
And so you can find themes of, even Gladys did a hip hop song in the 80s, okay,
Hmm.
that had that sound to it.
Yeah.
So I can then say, based on your question, Gladys Knight is my favorite hip hop artist.
I can dig it. But when you said Motown, I thought about Stevie Wonder
Oh,
because
yes.
yeah, because I remember I got into Stevie Wonder later in life, and I listened to the song "Do I Do,"
Oh, yeah.
and that's a long song. That song's about 10 minutes long. You gotta listen to the whole thing. But Stevie Wonder busts a rap line in that song.
I'm telling you, see, but many of our folks don't know that. You
Yeah,
know,
they don't know it. Yeah.
oh yeah, Sammy
Uh-huh.
Davis Jr. did hip hop. My goodness, in the early '50s, if you want to take it
Yeah.
back.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's a deep tradition,
Yeah.
and again, it goes looking at the past and how that has impacted the present. Hip hop goes
Right.
back decades.
Oh
Yes.
yeah. What were Baptist ministers doing when they were in that pulpit? They were
Thank
spitting bars.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your dedication to Howard University and the entire HBCU universe. We've really learned a lot from your presentation, and all of your colleagues at Howard University are really benefiting from you being there. And everyone who you called out, I know you needed an hour in order to really explain their research and to include all of the other great work that the great researchers at Howard. But I'm sure all of the ones you named are really grateful that you recognize what they're doing. And we're going to look into their research and to see if we can bring them on so we can hear more about it. We may not have an hour for you, but across many, many days, we have many hours to talk to all of these Class A researchers that you mentioned on the show. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tolson, to you and your team, and let's just keep it going. It's wonderful to be a part of this effort. Appreciate it.